podcast. And we are just excited to be here, like always on Thursday. Sometimes we change it up on y'all. We may come on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and that's just to accommodate our guests. Because some of our guests, we just like, well, all of our guests, hey, we're like, look, whatever we need to do, we will change it around so we can hear your story. So I'm excited that today is Thursday, and we've been waiting for this special guest for a very I think it's been a couple of months since we booked him, and so we're just really looking forward to hearing his story. But before we talk about that, we want to say that today is the day that the Lord has made. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to say any Bible scriptures today. I did Bible study yesterday. When you go to church and then you start feeling like, yeah, I heard a word from the Lord, and I'm just going to walk in it. But anyways, I'm just going on my little soap opera. But anyways, we want to thank y'all for tuning in to the Black Podcast. Thank you for supporting us over the last 2 years. We've been going strong for the last 2 years, and I'm so grateful, and we're so grateful that you continue to support us, that you share the videos, because that's how we grow as a community. That's the whole purpose of having this platform, is to make sure that everyone is growing, that we get people's stories and their journeys out. If you just look at these shows and then log off and you never go back to them, well, you're not doing your part in helping our community grow. So you got to make sure that you're sharing these videos. It's so important that you share these videos of our guests. And you could always go back and watch it on YouTube Live, or on our YouTube page, our websites. You can always find the videos. If there was something or someone on here that you just felt, I have to hear that message again, you always have an opportunity to watch those again. My background, well, I am Dr. Sherelle Hobson, and my background is in athletics and education. Been doing that for 17 years. And through that journey of being in education, I've noticed a lot of different challenges that are happening within our young Black men. And then I end up linking up with my partner here, and we shared similar stories, but he was in a different space, right? And so we were like, we need to create a platform where we could tell more stories. We need to educate our community on what's going on in the educational system, what's going on in the social work system. And so that's why we created the Black Podcast, to share those stories. But we also have a company, HSBA, where we'll talk more about that later on. But Brian, if you can just let everybody know why we're doing the Black Podcast, what the Black Podcast is about, and then who our guest for today will be.
Well, I mean, you laid it out well, but at the same time, so many people sleep on the power of the collective, the power of us when we come together. And I want to say it's been about 2, 3 years now that I started following a guy by the name of Dr. I'm always drawing a blank when I think of his name, Dr. Claude Anderson. Dr. Claude Anderson. He was over the Department of Education in Florida for a number of years, and he does a lot of interviews around rebuilding the Black community. And one of the his philosophy, or his approach is the 5-story building of rebuilding the Black community. And there's a certain component of our lives that each of those floors exemplifies. And I want to say it's a third floor that is media. Whereas he mentions we have to take control of media. We have to be able to tell the stories of our people. So whenever you mentioned us doing a podcast, initially I didn't take the whole thing into consideration, but like, this is powerful for us to be able to tell our story. Because if we use mainstream news, we're typically going to be inundated with the negative stories. And that's what the outside community is going to think of us. That's going to be their example. Oh, that's that type of person. Whereas they don't see enough of the stories, like the story we're about to hear from the gentleman that we have on today. So really just being able to put people in front of the camera, in front of the microphone, and show the abundance of excellence that we have across the spectrum, from professional athletes all the way to doctors, lawyers, attorneys, presidents of universities. We have excellence across the board, but most of the time people don't hear about that. So I'm not going to say too much about myself. You guys at least, those of you who have been watching for a while, you know who I am and you know where you can go to find out more. I'm ready to hear about this guest today. I always love whenever Dr. Hobson sends me over. She sends me over plenty of names to give her a title for. And when I finally get around to digging into that individual
Yeah,
to
about that.
put together a title, I love learning. I love learning about them, but I don't want to learn too much because I want my reactions here to be authentic. So, without further ado, before us today, we have Tramelle Howard. How is it going, my brother?
It is going good. How are you guys today? It's a beautiful hot day in Louisiana, but
Oh
it's
my
going well.
goodness.
How are you?
We like bang, 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 Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas. So we feel
Yeah,
the
that's
heat.
that's a tour right there. That's a tour right there.
At
Look,
That's it.
106
go ahead
degrees.
and
So,
get it.
yeah.
So, well, thank you so much. I know that you are extremely busy, as I told you earlier, but I'm just so grateful that we booked you a couple of months out, um, and you just stuck to your word, and you're here, and we are just so excited about having you and listening and hearing more about your story. Um, bef- Behind every glory is a story,
Yes.
and so we want to know more first before we dive into what you're doing right now.
Hmm.
um, who you are, where you're from, and the dynamics of your family.
Yep.
We want to know that all your business.
Yeah, get all into the nitty gritty of the business. So first, thank you guys for having me here today. It's really a pleasure to be here. As I told my people before I came on the show, I love to see shows for us, by us, and just this platform to elevate the experience of Black males and Blacks in general. It's necessary and needed. So thank you guys for the work that you do to bring these people. Bring folks here to elevate and tell their stories. So I'm Tramelle Howard. I am a native of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, by the way of Scotlandville, Louisiana, aka Fieldtown, USA. It is who I am, what I am, and then made me into everything that I am. Was born to a single parent. My mom had me, well, got pregnant with me at 16, had me at 17, was pregnant with me when she walked across the stage. So I'm one of those teenage mom that they had to show teenage moms, probably would have been on there back in the day. But my mama is my heart, my joy, my pride. She sacrificed so much for me in order for me to be here today. So shout out to my mom. She's probably watching here. She's probably going to have a lot of critiques, but shout out to my mom who's watching the show, just really for just doing all the things necessary to give me the opportunity to see the fruitfulness of life. And so I'm just really grateful and thankful for her. She couldn't have done it without her village. My grandparents, really just thankful for them. And just really showing me the way of right the importance of education, the importance of valuing of the village that it really took to raise me, got me involved with the church very early on, making sure I had the right support systems around me, just all of the people who helped me get to where I am. As you said, there is no glory without a story. And so I truly have a story. Grew up in a very, I guess, low income community, surrounded by a lot of different drugs, violence, all of the things. But to be able to leave and make my way out of that through education is just something that I'm so grateful for. But I'm also grateful for the experience that I had growing up in the environment that I did. Some of the greatest life lessons that I've learned came from that environment. So I never shone upon where I came from. I love it. To this day, I still, when people ask where I'm from, the field, that's my home. So just really grateful again to be here and have an opportunity to tell my story about how my life started and where I am now. So like I said, single parent home, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. All of the things that you can think of surrounding around me, seeing people being murdered, having family members in jail, having a father who was in and out of prison, incarcerated, all of the things happened to me. But I think they all shaped and molded me into the person who I think I am today, as a connector, a person who is a curation of vibes. I like to have a good time, and so yeah, that's Tramelle in a nutshell.
Wow, wow. Well, that sounds really interesting, and so we definitely want to get more into that. Um, it's important, right? I think that a lot of times in our community, we always speak on. Um, well, I'll say this. Even when I was writing a book, my mentor, when I first wrote it, she said, "Oh, this sounds good. You talk about your trauma, you talk about different things, but then you kind of like you go over it very smoothly, right?"
Hmm.
So, um, she was like, "You got to be very vulnerable. You got to get into it. You got to." And
Yeah.
so we're just so taught sometimes to be very guarded, right? And we know that our community really needs vulnerability. And
Absolutely.
I truly appreciate you sharing the fact that your mother, was a single mother. Shout out to mom, doing what she needed to do. Um, but when you speak on your environment, right? Your mother, your grandmother, your grandfather, those people were, when you were in the house, were speaking about those things, right?
Hmm.
But talk about that journey of the in between time of when you're at home and you're walking through the valley
Hmm.
to get to the school. I want you to speak on just the environment that you saw. What were you thinking? How was that experience for you? And then how were you able to um, choose, like, okay, do I want to go make this money fast and do these things, or do I continue to walk this path? Like, if you can talk more about that journey and like your mind, your thinking, and all that stuff that went into that place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's one of the things that I often talk about, talk to people about. And so one of the things that I share about like where I was raised and where I lived for my most of my childhood, it's probably 3 minutes away from the only historically black college university system in the world, which is Southern University. And so like you had basically both sides of the spectrum, like literally a gate separates the neighborhood that I grew up in one of the largest producing universities of black engineers, lawyers, like all of the things. And so like just being able to be exposed to that, I knew that there was another world, but there was a gate in my mind that separated me from that world. And so I just really loved school from a very early age. Like I was what you would call the teacher's pet. All of my teachers loved me, and I loved school. I used to love to read. I used to just all of the things. Like I was literally a nerd. I started
A
wearing
nerd. I
glasses.
was gonna say,
Yeah, a nerd. I
a
was a
nerd.
nerd. I started wearing glasses in first grade. Like it was just all of the things. Like so, people was like, "Look at you, you're just a teacher's pet." But you know, I owned that, and I just really knew that there was something bigger and better for me. My grandfather only had a ninth grade education, so he literally dropped out of school in ninth grade in order to take care of a family and to start thinking about how to make it like in the streets. And so, but I always remember him talking about the importance of education. And it wasn't until I became an adult that he was a person who only had a ninth grade education, but he was so cognizant of understanding how education could really change the pathway for the future. So he always talked about he called it get your lesson. Like he ain't know no lesson, he ain't know what we was doing, but he always made sure that we got our lesson. And so my grandfather really instilled in me the importance of like having education and making sure that no matter what was happening around me, when I got to school, that was my environment to be safe, to have structure, to not even thinking or worry about. Back then there was no such thing as school shootings and all of these things where we really felt like unsafe in a school environment, and so that was my safety net. And so I would see all of these things around me. I had friends in the neighborhood. I would see the things happening, but I had to make a decision. Like I knew that there was a different life. I wasn't quite sure what that life looked like, but I knew the pathway to a different life was through education. And so again, I had this exposure of Southern University, which is right 3 minutes away from my home. And then I had my grandfather, who only had a ninth grade education, telling me about this other thing. And so I just made a decision. And I think a lot of people, when you're young, you don't feel like you have to make these like decisions, but like early on, I think I was probably like the second grade where I was like, I'm going to get my lesson, and school is going to be the thing that helps me to a different life. And so I chose school. And I think right now I was an eighth grade teacher, and I talk a lot about to my students about consequences and really understanding like every decision you make, even from the eighth grade, has an impact on the consequence that you will receive going forward. And unfortunately, I think a lot of children or a lot of kids these days are choosing this fast life because that's all they're exposed to. So I really believe in exposure and exposing kids to difference so that they can know that there's things out there that are different from what they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis, and they can make different decisions that will lead to better consequences.
Yeah.
And so I think just exposure helped me get out of that environment, having people around me who supported me, even like in those days, like the neighborhood drug dealers was telling me the importance of going to school. So like when people look at them for all of the bad things that they quote unquote did in the neighborhood, many of them were like,
Yeah.
you need to go to school. This is not the life you want to live. Like a lot of them like fed that into me at a very early age.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, people talk about like that environment just being so bad. Like we saw some very bad things, killings and murders and all of the things. But a lot of those people who are out there doing that, like I never felt unsafe around them. because they
Mm,
were also the people who were there supporting me to do something different so that
yeah.
I wouldn't have to follow that same pathway. So it really takes a village. And sometimes your village consists of people that you don't think will be a part of your village.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm glad you shared that, and we've heard that on the show. With a couple of guests that talked about, it was some of the drug dealers that would, drop them off at school, like, well, you
Hmm.
better go to school,
Yeah.
and so, um, it just shows that we have it in us to we want to do right, right, and some people just that is their right, or that's
Yeah.
what they feel is their
That's what they
right.
feel is right.
And so right and wrong is in the eyes of whoever's looking, right?
The
And so it's
beholder.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
so it's like we look at it like, well, you should do better, or you should know, you should, should have chose something else. But if that's what they chose to do,
Well, I
or
mean, I think even for like people like drug dealers, like when you think about systemic issues and how it comes full circle, like the things that
absolutely,
our neighborhood drug dealers were doing back in the day, which was making a living through the selling of marijuana, is now like this big billion-dollar business that is now
right,
regulated by the government. And so,
right,
like, it's like they laid the foundation for what is now the quote unquote right thing. And now people are
right,
getting degrees in marijuana science and all of these
right.
crazy things that our literally neighborhood people did, just to make
When we
ends meet
talk
back
about
in the
crack,
day.
when
Yeah.
they talked about crack, it was them that was bringing all that stuff over here and selling it, and making it crack and cocaine and
Yep.
all this other stuff, and so if you can't tax it, then it's a problem. But now
Right.
that if you could put a tax, if you could put a dollar sign on
It's
it and
okay.
everybody benefits from it, then it's cool.
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother. That's a definitely a
That's a
different
whole nother podcast.
look. We'll be on this mug for 3 hours. So
Yes.
talk about in our community a lot of times, especially when to hear you talk about how you love education, right? I probably wasn't that girl. I wasn't the one that loved school. I wasn't the teacher pet. um but it was a non-negotiable in my house. I mean,
Yeah.
nobody talked about whether or not you was going to graduate from high school or whether or not you were going to college. Like that was like what you was going to do.
Yeah.
What else are you going to do, right? And so that was kind of the conversations we had. So I went to school because I had to. Went on and got my doctorates and all that kind of stuff. And people like, oh, you must love school. But it was like, no, it was always for me something that I knew I needed. Okay, if you
Hmm.
want to be in a very masculine, white dominant profession as an athletic director, well, you're going to have more than a face. You're going to have more than the average football coach. You're going to have these things. So I went and got those things because I knew that's what I wanted or
Yeah.
needed to have, not necessarily because I love school. So my vehicle to college, and it wasn't because it had to be. My family had, would have made have money or whatever to send me to college, but I was gifted to have a talent in track, and so I was always surrounded around athletes. And so I speak on. I want you to talk about in that space of elementary or middle school or high school where a lot of your peers, it was education wasn't something that everyone's talking about, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
about, it was more football games, basketball games, this player, that player. And that was usually the vehicle to getting to college or whatever. And then you talked about education because we knew, well, if you want to make it to the NFL, you got to get to
Yeah. School.
college.
Yeah.
So you got to pass your school, your classes, because there's no pass, no play. So it wasn't that education was important. It was, if you want to continue to play, you got to pass.
Yeah.
So with you being on the opposite side of like solely focused on your education, how was that experience for you when coaches are walking through the hallway like, hey, you can you dribble this basketball? You're like, no, I'm a nerd. I'm going to the library. You know what I'm saying? So what was that like for you being in a space where a lot of times we push more athletics or other things than education?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's kind of like, when you are an athlete growing up, like your parents kind of identify what is your niche. Like, so for example, like some parents, like you really are good at basketball. You can just play football just for whatever, but you're really good at basketball. I think early on, like people around me identify education as my niche. I was really tall, like I was really skinny and tall. So like I could put, I probably had, let me say I have athletic ability. I now play tennis, like I play sports now, like I do all of these things. But like I think early on, like people just identify my God given talent as education. Like my uncle Larry, we call him Uncle Bud, but Uncle Larry started calling me professor at like 5 years old. Like he would
Wow.
always call me professor. So like it was just all around me, people identified my God given talent as education. And so like yeah, they were coach like I got recruited to run track in ninth grade. But I was at a magnet school. I was like, nah, I'm just gonna really focus on school. And so there were people around me, like I had cousins who were like super athletic, played baseball, soccer, track, whatever it was out there, they were playing a sport. And I love sports. And to this day, I absolutely love sports. Like I want to go to all the games. Like I follow my favorite football teams and basketball teams across the country to watch them play. I absolutely love sports. But sometimes you gotta just be like, hey, that's just not my thing. Like I was good, but
Right.
I knew I was not gonna be next level good. Like I didn't
Yeah.
have those kind of talents. So it
Right.
was okay. I played in the neighborhood. I shot hoops in I
So
got a
you
few
did.
banged
You
up.
still socialized and
I
hung out and did the
socialized.
kid
Yeah.
thing. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and so, but I think early on, like people around me, because even then, like when I would go play basketball or baseball in the neighborhood with the people, afterwards I would be helping people with homework. So it was like it was always just
Yeah.
my thing was like
Yeah.
school, and so it was okay, and I owned it back then because like you said, like people always try to tag our avenue as like through some kind of athletic God given talent, but for
Mm,
me, like the support system around me, just they I feel like they identified and it was like, okay, we're gonna just make sure that you get your lesson, and you
right.
can go watch the baseball and play a little, for fun. But I had one cousin who tried to, if you're watching this, said that's my cousin said he tried to like force sports on us. I mean, we would be in the backyard playing 7 hours of baseball. We'd be playing basketball with a sock and a hanger because we didn't really have a goal. Like it would just be all these things. He wanted us to be these super athletes, but he was a super athlete, so he was trying to get us to be that. But for everybody else, like they just automatically knew that like my
They're like
talent.
you're wasting your time with
Yeah,
T.
yeah. I mean, I
He is
was pretty
not gonna
fast. I would
play.
win races at recess. Like, I feel like if I would have really stuck to it, I might have could have did a little one too. But like, I just love school, and so school was like my avenue at the time.
Wow, it's that's awesome to hear that because I know that I've always loved. I was a tomboy for a very long time until I got like my freshman year in high school, and somebody was like, "Well, you fine," and I was like, "I'm about to, I'm about to get cute on these boys right now." Somebody say I'm fine. Shoot, I wasn't even worried about that. I was worrying about football, pushing boys, fighting boys. So I was rough,
He was
but
rough, yeah.
yes. And then so when I got into education and I started coaching and teaching PE, I was like, man, this is the bomb. This is like the
Mhm.
bomb. They're gonna pay me to
To
teach them
do
how to play
this.
basketball. Like I was like, I can do this forever, but no, I cannot. But
Do
I did, start off being a PE teacher, and I just remember being outside and a kid getting hit in the head with a football because he's in the middle of the field with this book, and I'm like, put this book down, you know what
Now.
I'm saying, or move out the way, you know what I'm saying. So, like, I just when you start talking about how you was the nerd, I'm like, was he the kid that was in the way with the book?
Now, I don't think I was in the way of football because I really liked it. Like, so I wasn't like, trying to like throw my love for school on everybody else because I really like sports. Like I would play all the pickup games.
Yeah,
Like I remember we used to play baseball with like a tennis ball and a stick, like for 4 hours in the middle of the apartment complex that we
yeah,
lived in. Like we played basketball. Like we had these two columns in our apartment complex, so we
hmm,
would get a ball. We didn't have a goal, so we used the columns as our goal. So I mean, I was in the trenches of
right,
sports,
right.
but
You
I
just
knew that wasn't my skill.
focus, right? Yeah, I like that. I like that. So, talk about your journey. I guess from high school to transitioning to, you know, when you started to discover, like, I don't know, it sounds like you almost knew who you were early.
No,
I don't
I
know,
mean,
is that
I
true
think
or
I think I knew who I was. I knew who I was early, but I don't think I had identified like all of the steps to get there. Because although through education, like I knew that that was my path, I didn't necessarily have the skill set from a family standpoint of understanding the true dynamics of how to navigate it. So my mom had never went to college. My grandmother started college, but she dropped out after she had my uncle. And so like they knew like the concept, but no one could really talk to me about scholarships and like financial aid and like how to really navigate those steps. And so after high school, I went to college at the University of Louisiana at Monroe. And that's was like we showed up, like I don't know what we thought. Like I thought we was gonna walk into the dorm room and it was gonna be like in a hotel. Like me and my mom was at orientation. We was like, oh, there's no sheets, there's no pillows, there's nothing. Like we were clueless. So we had to just really transform our thinking and understanding the collegiate experience. And so I went there for a year and a half at 17 years old, had never been away from home. And it was amazing. Like my freshman year of college was absolutely amazing. And it was also amazing for like not only me, but my mom, my grandmother, my grandparents, because they were all experiencing this for the first time with me.
Through
So I felt
you.
like we were doing it together.
Yeah.
So we packed up my car, we packed up my grandma's car, and we drove 4 hours away from home, and we went to Monroe and we did the whole thing, buying the refrigerators and like all of the things. It was an experience for all of us. And my freshman year of college really opened my mind up to like, wow, the world is just like so much bigger than I've even assumed it to be. I love football, so we would go to Southern football games, like all of the Southern football games. We would travel, so I was very familiar with like all the SWAC schools, like Southern and Alcorn and Jackson State and Texas Southern and Grambling, like all of the schools that we played in conference in like football. But that was my only like real understanding of like the collegiate experience. So like I didn't start learning about the Howards and the Morehouses and all of the other opportunities until later on in life. But college was that, and so I stayed at ULM for a year and a half. They ended up losing accreditation for my major. So I left and went to a school by the name of University of Louisiana Lafayette, where I graduated from. Same experience. It was amazing. And then like once I was at UL, like I had kind of figured this thing out. Like I kind of knew how to navigate college. I got a job at an apartment complex where I got free rent, so I didn't have to ask my parents for money for rent. Like I was navigating. I was good. I was in the trenches and understood how to navigate it. And then I knew I wanted something more. So I ended up going to law school after all of that was said and done, and graduated from law school. And so really for me, like I knew I had to go to college, similar to you. Like there was no option. Like I didn't know how to navigate college. I didn't even know what I wanted to major in or what I wanted to be, but I knew that when I graduated high school, the next fall I had to be at somebody's college, on somebody's college campus. And so just really learning how to navigate college while also experiencing college was a good learning tool for me, because it really showed me the ropes as I was pulling the ropes. Like no one like laid the foundation for me. We pulled the rope together and we navigated, and then broke apart. We put it back together, but we did it all together as a family unit. And so that was like the college experience. But college was amazing. I loved it. It was freshman year. I wilded out. I went out every night. Just all of the things about a young 17-year-old first time away from home would do. Like that was my college experience.
Wow. Wow.
Man, I love it. I'm over here taking notes on some of the things that you're saying because there's so much overlap.
He's a nerd too.
Man, so like I think back, I never ninth grade, I was in math class and I'm squinting at the board. I thought it was normal because I had always, squinting at the board. And my teacher was like, "You might need to get your parents to take you to the eye doctor." And I finally went. And I was athlete. I was playing football, basketball, and running track at the time. So I did not want to wear no glasses. I was not trying to be looking like no nerd. So I actually was able to get contacts before getting glasses. And
lucky.
I know, right? But it was life changing because when I walked out of the store, getting the contacts, I could see stuff like in sharp images. I'm like, what is this? What the world's supposed to look like? It was crazy. But you mentioned that, and then you went on about people looking at you as a teacher's pet because of the fact that you love school. Like to this day, I'll mention something to my mom about my children, or they'll say something to her and like, "Boy, them children just like you, love some school." I can relate, being a teacher's pet, so on and so forth. And I remember the specific phrase, "Get your lesson." Yeah. Like here in the South, I guess it's prevalent across the
Uh-huh.
South because I remember my granddad and my grandma would always say it. You been getting your lesson. Better make sure you get your lesson. And
If they
my
don't know
dad
nothing
was,
else, they need that lesson.
I know, right? So, I can relate so much. And then you mentioned a little bit later, as far as when you went to college, like your eyes open. I gave a leadership development workshop at University of Southern Miss yesterday, and I expressed the necessity to get outside of your community. Like if you really want to grow, you need to go see that there is more out there. So I love that you mentioned that because it's easy, especially across the South. I love that you are here in the quote unquote deep South. There's so many of us that we get stuck in our communities and we don't go that far out. And I mean, and there's certain small pockets that literally almost never get outside of their area code
Yeah.
or their zip code. And then it's when you go to college and you see people from other parts of the world or parts of the nation, have conversations with them. They tell you stories, and maybe you go on a trip, to catch a football game, whatever it may be, and you realize the world is so much bigger than what you saw in your
Yeah.
community. So
Yeah, I
I
think
just
it's
love that you
amazing.
mentioned that.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, no, no. I love that you mentioned that because it makes it so much, or it makes you so much more relatable than whenever they see that title, they may assume, and that's
Hmm.
why we take them through the story. They
Yeah,
may
yeah.
assume that he had a good life, like he must have had some parents that was in the law space that helped him. Like never know that story, and I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's vitally important. I think I don't even I'm still learning as an adult, like the importance of exposure. So I was an eighth grade teacher about 6 years ago. And so we took our students for like an eighth grade culminating trip to New Orleans, which is only like 45 minutes away from where we live in Baton Rouge. But to see my kids' expression when we were on the bridge, like as we were crossing into New Orleans as a city, was like, I'm like, well, y'all never been to New Orleans. And like for some of them, like getting on the interstate was like an experience. Like, and so I just think that we sometimes take for granted like the importance of exposing students and people around us to difference. And I think even for adults, like there are a lot of adults who I feel like who live in my community right now who haven't been exposed to other things. And so you when you're getting ready to make critical decisions and like think about decisions that like are for the benefit of our city, they're so trapped in a mindset that lacks exposure and lacks diversity of thought and lacks all of those things. And so you see it like play out even as adults. And so if I don't say anything else, like find a way to expose people. And with the internet, you don't necessarily even have to leave your front door to expose yourself to other things, as it relates to like just challenging your own mindset and challenging your own way of thinking. As an adult, I've done that like once a month. I'm trying to figure out a different way to challenge the way I think about things and perceive the world, because the world is just so much bigger than our in-depth view of it. So yeah, that was yeah.
Wow.
Those things.
Wow.
And that makes me think, or go even deeper, because I I don't tiptoe around talking about race.
Hmm.
Being in the social work field, like the most taboo and uncomfortable conversations, we have to have them on a regular basis. So we were I was given the training yesterday, and I made reference to how um, leaving out of South Mississippi, I didn't see, especially in my county down in the South Mississippi, I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me that were in the white collar professional world. I didn't
Yep.
see a lot of that. But then when I went to LSU to work on my doctorate and I went downtown Baton Rouge, I'm seeing all these brothers dressed all sharp going to business meetings. Like, what? Like,
Yeah.
we out here doing it like this? Like,
Yeah.
this close to home? So, like, it exposes you to things that like your mind just doesn't fathom because you've never been exposed to it.
Yep.
And a
Yeah,
lot of
and I
times
think
come too
that's
far.
yeah, and I think that that's just so like it's so funny that you say that about like Baton Rouge, because as a native of Baton Rouge, it's like we feel like we don't see the things, and so like
Mhm.
the more you advance and go to like,
Yeah.
because we feel like lots of like of the positions of power in our city consist of white men, And so,
Yeah.
like, for a person growing up here, like, that's all we ever see. But it's always interesting when I meet people who are not from Baton Rouge to come into our city and what they see. Like, so you see the world differently, even from like how other people view
Yes.
your own community.
Yes.
And so, like, that's why that exposure is just so. Because I mean, I meet people constantly who never been to Baton Rouge, who have just all of these great things to say, and I'm like, I love my city, but it's so good to hear someone else who
Yeah.
come and see things that I may not always see because
Yeah.
I'm here all the time. I see the same things all the time. And so, like, it's just really like an aha moment to hear you say that, because that also lets people know, like, you have to still expose yourself outside of the things that you think you're aware of, you think you know, because it
Right.
could look different to other people. So that's, yeah.
And I would, also jump in on that conversation about, exposure, because although I loved sports, because of what it brings as far as competition and the skills that we learn along the way, as a coach, I made it my responsibility to not only coach kids, but it was about exposure for me, right? It's like, okay, if you got this talent and you're able to go to college for free, so why not use it, right? It doesn't mean that you have to solely focus on that has to be your identity, but if it's something that you can use as a vehicle to go to the next level, why not use it? And so I would always speak on exposure. So I've worked at this small school before, and I remember, every day I would dress up, you know, like blazer, heels, I'm walking through the hallway, and the girls and the kids looking at me like, why she always dressed up? Like, even the adults would be like, girl, what you trying to be cute for? And I used to tell them, I don't lead by example because I'm the example. So the only time they're going to see a black woman who loves sports still look like a woman is me. So
Hmm.
it was my responsibility. I used to tell them, I said, doesn't mean that just because I'm a coach, don't mean every day, all day, I got to be in tennis shoes and a baseball hat.
Yep.
You got to have balance. Sometimes it's time to be a woman. Sometimes it's time to be, a coach or whatever it is I need to be at that time. And so I think that's so important that we, as in our community, that we find, we own who we are, and we
Yep.
expose it to to others, because they don't know unless they see. They don't know that, hey, when you see somebody, this is the kind of way this is the way that you have a conversation with them. No one said that all black women have to be loud and obnoxious and this and that. We can talk in a normal tone. We know how to talk without or speak without rolling our eyes. Because if you don't show them by being the example, all they're going to know is what they see on TV, or so it's our responsibility. And so when you talk about exposure, it's just so important, because there's a lot of times when you've been in that space for a long time, you have no idea. I have kids that, where I was teaching at, Houston was 30 minutes away, and they would be like, Coach, I'm not going to be at practice this week because I'm going out of town. And I'd be like,
Where
oh,
you going?
where you going?
Houston.
Houston? I'm like, what the hell? Now this, but it you training your mindset of like, to them that is out of town, to
Absolutely.
them that is a vacation. you know it's just like winning looks different for everyone, success looks different for everyone. So it's our responsibility, especially those who are in education, who are coaches, who are leaders, who are speakers, who are whatever, lawyers, that every opportunity you have, you are your brand, you
Yeah.
are the exposure. When they see you, they have to see different. They have to see, oh, you from down here, you from the field. Now
Right.
you're talking about, I'm saying, now you're doing this. They have to
Yeah.
see it. And so it is so, I'm just so, I really appreciate that about you, is staying true to, this is who I am.
Yeah.
And this is what I do. I think a lot of people don't have that separation. And kind of something off the subject, I was laughing about Brian when he was talking about his contacts. Because when I told you about my first time in high school, when they were talking about, oh girl, you fine, I was the fine girl with hazel eyes, but they didn't know
I had Hazel
the
too.
hazel eyes from the flea market. Until they started burning one day, and I had to take them out, and they were like, man, she lied, like she lied to us. But it was that environment. Like, I learned exposure because my father was in the military, so I never really had an opportunity to build relationships with like childhood friends and stuff like that, because it was like 3 years, it's time to
Absolutely.
go.
Yeah.
you know, and so you met new friends, like, bye girl, you know, and then you go meet somebody else and you become attached to them. So living in Hawaii, living in Germany, living in El Paso, where, you know, Black people are the minority to the Hispanics, you
Yeah.
know, you're like,
What's going on? Yeah.
yeah, what's going on here? So I think that it's just so important that whatever space that we're in, that we're exposing um, the youth and even adults to other
Yeah.
things, you know, and that is our responsibility. If you're going all these places and doing all these things, but you're not telling anybody about it, you're not bringing anybody with you, you're not creating anything that's helping anybody, then what you're not really living in my
Yeah.
book.
Yep.
So I want you to speak on when you decided, because you kind of just talked about, yeah, and I went to law school. You know, you said law school like is working at, you know, Circle K. I went to law school real quick, graduated, and now I hear. So what was your why or your reason behind um, becoming a lawyer?
Yeah.
Why you didn't stay in education besides the money sucks?
Well,
What's the
so
reason
I'll
behind
address both of those. I'll address both
it?
of those. So I'll address the why, and I'll address like the money situation part of education. So the reason I originally went to law school, I went to law school because I felt like there was something more. So I got my first degree was in broadcast journalism. I had these dreams that I was going to be like you, covering all these sports for ESPN, and that's what the world was going to take me. And I loved it. So I interned as a sports reporter at KTT, ABC affiliate. Loved it, but to your point, like in the beginning stages of broadcasting, like the money is just not good. So you have to kind of go on, move up with the market and all those things. So I was like, I need to get some kind of additional criteria under my belt just in case this doesn't work out the way I want to. So when I went to law school, made the decision to go to law school, I had this idea that I wanted to be a family law attorney. Like I was going to go fight to get children child support, and I was going to go do all of these things to help people get out of marriages, and I was just going to be like that guy who was the family law attorney. But when I started working in a family law clinic at law school, like I was really intrigued with the kids who came into our clinic with their parents. I was like, wow, like the parents are experiencing these different divorces and like child supports and all of these things. Like, what is the experience of the kids, and like how can I have a deeper impact or connection with those kids? And so when I graduated from law school, well, it was my second year of law school, I was like, you know what? After I'm done with this, I don't know how, but I'm going to figure out a way to go to education. So I started telling people, hey, I'm going to get this degree because I know that it's necessary. I need it. I'm here. But after this, I'm not going to take the bar. I'm not going to do all those things. I have a different trajectory for my life. And people started to look at me like I was crazy. And I didn't have the answers either because I didn't know what it like actually looked like, but I knew that there was something different for me. So I went to law school, graduated from law school. I got offered a job. Before I graduated, I was working at the Office of General Counsel for the state of Louisiana. I worked with 12 other attorneys, preparing them for like all of the things that come with state government and state law. And I was like, this is cool. Well, my boss ended up leaving to go to the Office of State Contracts, which was procurement at the time. And he was like, I'm taking you with me. So I went with him. He created a position for me. Like, so it was just all just working out. But one day I was at work and I was like, man, this is not for me. I don't like this. Like, I'm like, it's mundane, it's boring. But, you know, growing up in my family, like, stability was like necessary. So my grandparents was like, you get that job, you stay there for 30 years and you retire. And I'm like, what? This just can't be life. I'm not about to be here for 30 years and retire. And now I think about it, like I'll be almost a retirement if I had stayed there. But, so I just like, you know what, this is not for me. So I ended up joining Teach for America. I joined Teach for America as a non-traditional teacher, and it was like, what are you doing? You went to law school, you wasted all this money to do blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I want to be a teacher. Like, this is what I want to do at this point in my life. So I started teaching in Ruralville, Mississippi. Um, I stayed on the campus of Cleveland State while I prepared to go teach at Ruralville, Mississippi. At Ruralville Middle. And when I walked in that classroom for the first day at Ruralville Middle, I was like, yep, Lord, this is my calling. This is where I'm supposed to be. I don't know how I'm about to pay my bills. I don't know nothing, but this is where I'm supposed to be. And, and I walked through that classroom and I loved it. I loved every second. I love my experience with my kids. I love the the things that they needed from me as a teacher. Like I just loved our connections, our communications. I loved how they like leaned on me as like a mentor, big brother, some of them like a father figure. It was just all of the things. And so Came back to Baton Rouge and started teaching at Kenilworth Science and Technology, eighth grade history. Loved it, loved it, loved it. There was nothing you could tell me about my profession. And at the time, I didn't have kids. Well, I still don't have kids. Let's say at the time, I didn't have kids. I didn't have like a familiar, like a family to like take care of. So like I was making like $55,000 a year, and that was like, hey, I mean, I can do all the things I need to do. I could pay my rent, like I could do all the things, like in Louisiana, it was good.
Take care of
Uh,
me.
like it take care of me. I mean, I don't have to think about the family part of it just yet. And I started to see like actually in education, like the ecosystem is so large, like it doesn't stop at being a teacher. So people like to talk about like, oh, teachers don't make enough money, but the education ecosystem doesn't stop at teachers. So you have assistant principals, you have principals. So I took an internship with the Department of Education, and we were in a meeting, and I asked them one day, I was like, how many of you have been teachers? And only one person raised their hand. And so I'm like, we're in here making all of these decisions about what's happening in education, and none of you have ever stepped foot in the classroom. And you're so far removed that you're not trying to create like the policies that I believe are necessary to have effective in what I'm experiencing in my classroom in both Ruleville and in Baton Rouge now. And so I was like, you know what? There's something more. So actually, in that moment, I decided to run for office. So I ran for school board. After I was in my like second, third year of teaching, and I was like, you know what, I'm about to run for school board. Ran for school board, ended up winning, be the 8 year incumbent, and got indulged in the policy of education. And that's when I learned a whole different side of like, oh my God, education is so much more than what it is in my schoolroom, in my classroom, in my school building, and just in general. And so now we're like in control of a $500 million budget and like all of these things that make education work. And I'm like, wow, it's so much bigger. And so I'm like, I have to keep going. So I worked at City Year, which is a nonprofit that pushed into schools. And now in my current role, I'm the state director at the Education Trust, state director for the entire state of Louisiana. And so what we do is we strictly look at policies, education policy that is centered around the experience of Black and Brown students and students from low income backgrounds. So how do we create conditions in order for Black and Brown students and students from low income backgrounds to be successful? And so education is my pride, my joy. It's what gets me up at night. It's my why. I know for me as a young Black male growing up in a single parent home that it saved my life. And
Yeah.
so it would be it would be less of me to not figure out how to do the same for other people. So in my fight every day, I am trying to figure out how can we make conditions better so that Black and Brown students and students from low income backgrounds can get the promises that education should be, and they get the root, root reap the fruits. Excuse me, reap the fruits of what education should be for every single child every single
Every
day.
day. Yeah.
And so there is money in this ecosystem, and so like I encourage people to teach, but I also encourage people to explore
Yeah.
the ecosystem of education and how we make this all work, because we need great teachers, we need great school leaders, we need great policymakers, we need great advocates, we need great people mentoring. So there's a lot of different ways to have an impact in education, where you can reap the benefits of being successful. So I don't have to worry about how I'm going to pay my bills or what I'm going to eat at night, and I still get to fight for students and work in education and have a direct impact on what happens in students' lives through policy. And so there is ways for you to continuously be successful and make the money that you deserve in this field.
Wow. I thank you for that, because I know when I used to sit in these faculty meetings and they would say all the teachers stand up that's been doing it for 45 years, and it's like, and they give them like this little pencil that
Pencil.
says, and I'd be like, man, hell no, I'm not sticking around here for 45 years to get no
Let's
pencil.
get a pencil.
I'm not about to do that. But the type of influence you have and the impact you can make is so priceless, right? When you see those kids that now are able to go on and be lawyers and doctors, and I've always had a gift to connect with those who are counted out. I've always had a gift to connect with those who, um, you know, maybe they're not a nerd, or maybe they don't know who they are, or those students that everybody have forgotten about or
Yeah.
counted as like, okay, forget that kid is jacked up. I've always been able to connect with those kids for some reason, like, hey, what we doing? And
Hmm.
they'll gravitate towards me. So I know that my space was in education, but I knew it wasn't in the classroom,
Gotcha.
right?
Yep.
And so I was like, so when I'm sitting there, I'm like, if I do anything for 30 years, it better be going up,
Yep.
or making some kind of change, or doing something, because if it's just sitting in this classroom, I can't do it. And
Yep.
so I'm glad you talked about, you can be in education and still walk in your purpose, but there's so many things that we can get involved in,
Absolutely.
but they don't speak about that a lot of times to
Mm.
us, right? You
Yep.
don't hear too many principals or leaders come in there and say, hey, does anybody want to think about running for this or running for
Mhm.
that? It's like the only ones that talk about that are the ones that are in the office already. You
Yep.
don't hear about, Black women being athletic directors. We didn't hear about, us being in these leadership roles. Nobody came in there. Coaches didn't come in and say, hey, we're looking for a woman athletic director, or we're looking for a woman to help, design the curriculum for athletics. And
Yeah.
so I was always the person like you thinking, well, shit, it might just be me that need to do it,
Exactly.
So I'm so glad that you were in that space and you were able to connect. This is what I'm good at, but this is what I know I'm called to do.
Yep. Yep.
And but also make it work for you. And I think a lot of times in our community, we um compromise on our purpose
For money.
to satisfy our
Hmm.
pockets,
Hmm.
right? And so it's like, man, I love education, but shit, that shit don't make no money. I'm about to
Yeah.
go be a lawyer. I can charge y'all right now $100 to talk to y'all,
Yeah.
hour. And
Yep.
so I think we do that a lot in our community because we don't think about or connect enough with people to say, okay, you love doing this and you're really good at that. Why don't you try to do this?
Yeah.
And if it's not already there, why don't you create it?
Created. And I tell people all the time, like, I tell kids all the time because people always like, I go into schools, like, fashion is like my second favorite thing. So I like to dress nice. I like to like wear. They're
I
like, how
thought you
you?
named your second favorite thing. You have like
I
all
have like
these.
a lot of favorite things. So
Okay, so
fashion is
fashion
one
is
of my
one.
things. Fashion is one of my
Yeah.
things. And so, kids are always like, "Oh, you got a nice watch. Oh, your blazer nice. Like, you must make a lot of money." And I'm just like, the thing that I love the most about my career in this point is like I chased my passion and the money came. The money wasn't always there. The money wasn't always like even in my 50-foot peripheral vision, but like I knew what made me happy and that's what I chased. And so the money is going to come. And I tell people this all the time when I go and talk to different folks. Like, chase what you believe is your purpose, your passion, and what makes you happy. And the
Yeah.
money is going to come. Like, you're going to be so happy in your purpose that you're going to create opportunities to make more money. Now I
Mm,
get, people will pay me to come speak to them or, but I always have chased my passion and my passion has always led my work. And so, and I also don't think that because you do good work as far as like hard work as I would call it, that you should live like a life where you are not, you know, driving nice cars or living
right.
well or wearing nice clothes. Like, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. Like, you can do both and like you can live in your dream, live in your passion and purpose, and also make money. And so like I tell people to chase your passion and purpose and the money will come.
Wow. Thank you for that.
And you're speaking
Brian,
my
when he
language.
start rubbing that head, he gonna.
Hey, I'm about to go for it.
I already know
And
you. I already know you. Because when you start
he's,
doing this, I'm like, oh, here we
he's
go.
speaking my language because so many. I mean, Dr. Hobson knows one of my primary forms of revenue slash takes up most of my time is I train entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
So from idea to profit, like everything that it takes, the mindset, putting together your legal entity, applying for your duns, like the entire process. And then, the team that I'm working with, my primary business partner, he's a sales guru. So he's how we really get them to scale. But one of the things about entrepreneurship is so many people that get into that space, they see the end result and
Hmm.
that's what they want. They don't realize that you need to have a passion. You need to
Yeah.
have something that makes you hop out the bed and say, you know what? I'm pissed off that society is running this way. I'm about to be a solution to it.
Yep.
And that's what's going to drive you. You create product, service around that, and that will tell you, okay, I guess I'm an entrepreneur. Not
Yeah.
I want to be an entrepreneur because it looks like that. No, do what you know need to be done, and that will make you an entrepreneur. And if you do it the right way for long enough, there's a gentleman by the name of Zig Ziglar, and I love the way that he put it. He says, if you help enough people get what they want in life, you can have everything that you want in life.
Mhm.
So if you're not chasing the money, but you're really chasing that purpose and you're fulfilling that purpose, the money gonna come and hit you on the back of your head. You ain't gonna know what happened,
You, I'm
but you
telling
got to
you.
stay focused on that purpose.
I
And
mean,
Um,
it's
and
getting
it's
your
people.
mind.
My mentor used to tell me this all the time, and you know, when you're living life in, like, especially now, like the way kids are coming up with social media, you always see people who are like at their end result. And to your point earlier, like, you see the glory, but you don't know their story. There were many nights when I first started doing this work, like we were like getting 2 boxes of pizza and having house meetings with people and just trying to talk about education. There were many nights where I just, I was making little to no money, but I continued to do it because it continued to feed my spirit. It continued to feed my heart. It continued to feed my drive. And I would have never thought that where I started in this journey is where I would end up now. Many of my classmates, we graduated law school in 2015, so 7 years ago. Many of them were like, "Oh, you crazy. You don't know what you." And I mean, and now that I think about my journey and their journey, we're all at the point of glory. We had different stories, but we are all at our own individual glory. So your glory is your glory. My glory is my glory. And so you can't compare stories to get to glory. So like, just figure out what you want to do, chase that, let that be what drives you and what gets you up out the bed every night. And your glory will come. It may look different than someone else's, but it will come.
yeah, and it's supposed to look different.
Yep.
You mentioned taking the alternative path, like you didn't go and take the bar exam. It was the same thing with me in social work, whereas most of the social workers, they're about to take their licensure exam towards the end of the year. I wasn't worrying about a licensure exam.
Hmm.
I'm getting my business in line because as soon as I graduate, I'm going to get this contract, that contract, this contract, and I'm
Hmm.
going to be helping develop that organization that you're trying to get to hire you.
Yeah.
And people were looking at me like, "What are you doing? Like, why aren't you getting your life?" I'm not trying to go and sit in a mental health institute and see clients every single day. I'm not hating on you if that's what you want, but that's not my path.
Yeah.
And my path got me a contract before I even graduated. I had a contract waiting for me to start a mentorship program and to serve as a leadership consultant over that program through my own company.
Yeah.
And that shows people. I got a young fella right now. He's in Washington, D.C. He started to come watch me deliver speeches when I was working on my master's. He would always tell me, B, I'm going to be just like you, man. Because he was in the undergraduate program when I was in the master's. I'm going to be
Hmm.
just like you, B. I'm like, no, man, don't be just like me. You be you, but you just be that best version of
The
yourself.
best
And he
version of
is out
yourself.
there
Yep.
killing it in his own right. He posted, or he did a live yesterday from the conference that he's at in DC, and I hit him up and said, I see you, man. And he was like, man, if it wasn't for you, I probably wouldn't be here. And we have to just go out there
Yep.
and just be the example, not saying, hey, do it this way, but just be the example.
Yep.
And ultimately, people realize, you know what? I don't have to be the quote unquote status quo. I can actually blaze my own trail and
Yep.
become that new status quo. Let's
And I
be
mean,
the
it's going to be
example.
difficult because I mean, a lot of the trails and journeys and roads that you take look different because no one has ever taken them, and so you have to
Exactly.
create and figure out how to cross hurdles that other people haven't crossed just yet. But that's also okay because that's a part of your journey. I tell people all the time, like, if I leave from Baton Rouge on my way to New Orleans, like, there's multiple ways that I can get there. But at the end of the day, we all going to New Orleans, and so, like, just continue to blaze your own path, continue to walk in your own truths, and just be authentic and show up and show out. And so,
Show up and show out.
it's
That's it.
show up and show out. Like, it's just it's necessary. And your showing up and showing out is going to look different than mine, but guess what? We're all showing up and showing out and bringing our best version. So, to your point, just be.
Real talk. I
So
love it.
I want you to speak on something real quick. So being that we're in this system of education that is designed to do exactly what it's designed to do, and so to some people the system is working out great, and for others the system is we look at or some people look at it as broken. And education hasn't always been in the favor of Black and Hispanic cultures, right? Because the policies that were created, the discipline that's created, things that are created are usually to hinder us or to keep us in a certain space, right? And from what I gather from you, you don't bite your tongue for no one. You very raw, I can see you in there like, no, we not about to do that because that's not gonna work. So I want you to just talk about being in a system, being a part of a system but not being the system, I guess. I mean, because lately I've had some challenges of my own going on, but lately the message that I've been gathering from like Bible study and all these things start talking about whenever you're a disruption in a system, expect to have trials, tribulations,
Mhm.
challenges, these things. So I know I have mine because I'm definitely one like you. I expose people, and I just expose by just being me, right? I'm like, hey, I like to win. I'm a win. Now you can come win with me, or you can figure out your own win. So because I am in that space where I've always been the one to expose others, not in a intentional way, but just being who I am, doing things different, operating different, talking different. Um, it can create an issue or a challenge for you. Can
Yeah.
you talk about being in this space of now you're in leadership, now you're doing policies, you're in the room with the people that we probably have never seen and you probably didn't know was in there either, like you said, who don't even be in classrooms, so nobody can say, oh, he used to be a principal at such and such, because those people that create those programs or create those policies, like you said, haven't been in the classroom, they don't know. So how was that experience, if you can talk about just being in that space where you're very raw, you're very straight up, and you're very black and white, and then these people are coming up with policies that you're like, this is not going to benefit the kids that I know.
Mhm.
How has that experience been for you as a leader, as a black male in those type of leadership positions in education?
No, that's a phenomenal question. Because I tell people all the time, like, there's no secret that education is a white dominant world. When you pull up any of the numbers, pull up any of the statistics about who's in the classrooms, who's the superintendents of schools, who are the people who are on school boards, like, it is a white dominant space. And so it's very difficult, in a lot of sense, to show up, as who you are. I'm a black man, twisting my hair, I have tattoos, I wear earrings. Like, so automatically people assume when I walk into a room, like, what am I bringing to the table? And so what I tell people all the time is, like, you just have to be comfortable with who you are and whose you are, and you have to show up into that every single day. And so I show up in every single room, no matter who's in the room, unapologetic about who I am, unapologetic about my experience, and unapologetic about what I believe is true for students who look like me, who are experiencing education in the system that wasn't designed for them. And that's very challenging, and not everybody has the wherewithal or willing to make the sacrifices necessary, to do that. I've had my job threatened. I've had people try to take everything that I worked so hard for because of how I show up. So to answer your question, it's difficult, but for me, it's necessary. I gave a speech not long ago at a professional development for teachers, and many of them were talking about, you know, well, I'm afraid to speak out because of X, Y, and Z, or I'm afraid to do this because of X, Y, and Z. At some point you have to be willing to make a sacrifice to say or to do the work that you say you're doing. And so for me, as a black male who utilized education to, in my own right, save my life, like, it's very critical. This is not a game for students who look like me, who only way out is through a pathway of education. And so we just have to become more serious about how we show up to this work, and it's going to be uncomfortable. But I am a firm believer that the truest and the rawest form of growth happen in moments when we're uncomfortable. And so you're going to have to make people uncomfortable. You're going to have to be uncomfortable, but you have to show up in a way where this is urgent. Like, education is urgent in the
Yeah,
world and in the system that is trying to serve our students, especially when it wasn't designed for them in the first place. And so
right.
that's how I show up. I'm unapologetic about who toes I step on. I'm unapologetic about who feelings I hurt, and I don't subscribe to white guilt and white tears. And so That's just who I am. Everybody doesn't have to show up like that. You just have to figure out what's your lane,
Yeah,
walk in that lane, and show up in that lane. But make sure that you're showing up with a sense of urgency, because the kids that we serve, or the kids that we say we serve,
they
um,
need us.
really need it, and they need us.
Absolutely, because we are their voice, like I was saying earlier. We don't lead by example. We are the example. And if I don't speak up for women, if I don't speak up for young girls, if I don't be the voice in that room to say, no, we deserve to have this too, then who's going to do it? And so
Yeah.
if you're not in that space with your twist, with your earrings, still with a blazer, still coming from the field and still being educated, if you're not there to say that, then those other kids are going to think that they can't get there, or that they don't matter, or nobody understands, because you have somebody in the room who does understand, who
Hmm.
has seen it, who does know, who does value education. So what better example do they have than you? And so I'm
Yeah.
just so grateful that you stand in that space, and that you own that, right? Because
Yeah.
that's not an easy space to be in. I mean, even with me, I hear people all the time, just try not to, just say this, but don't say too much. Because if you
Mhm.
say too much, then it's gonna make it seem like this, and ooh, oh, they might think this of you, or they may, and it's like, I don't. You get to some point, and I think I'm getting to where you're probably have already been, but I'm getting to the point where it's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm going to say what the truth is, and that's it. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's all you have. And I
Yeah.
know one of my mentors was saying one of her biggest regrets in life, when she experienced things similar as a black woman in a very male dominant profession, athletic director space or athletic space. She said her biggest regret was that she never fought.
Yeah. And I think people see it all the time. I
We
have a
just pray about it and we leave, we go do something
and we
else.
do so. I have a friend, a young black female doctor, and if you're watching this, I'm talking about you. She know who I'm talking about. We talk all the time about situations that occur, and she wished she would have said something. I'm like, we have to no longer wish, but we are the voice in those spaces for a reason. We have to speak up, and it's sometimes it becomes tiring, because you often feel like you always got to be the black voice, or you always got to tell people when they're. But you have to just get uncomfortable with you being uncomfortable, but also making other people uncomfortable. If we truly want change, if we truly want to like reconstruct systems, if we truly want to see our people win in a lot of situations, like there's no such thing as balance. Like the
Hmm.
world was created in a with like black people at one point were considered three-fifths of a person. Like, so the world was never really looking out for our benefits. So when we're in and we occupy these spaces, it's not ours to occupy just to say, oh, I'm such and such and I'm here. No, you have to disrupt these spaces. Like, you have to disrupt these systems in order to see true change. Otherwise, you're just another token taking up a seat, for the sake of having a seat, but not really to release power back into the people that you say you serve. So, yeah.
Man, you said a lot. Um, and you're still in Baton Rouge. I got a business partner, good friend in the real estate space over there, and I've been telling them for the longest, got to get back over there, got to get back over there, got to get back over there. So when I come back over there, we're definitely gonna have to link up, and
Yes, for sure.
it ain't nothing but a hop and a skip. What, 4 hours and some change from Houston? So I might have to tell you, Dr. Hobson, give us certain amount of hours for boy time, for men time, and then you can come on and join us.
What? You already know I'm gonna show up. You gonna tell me 12? I'm like, no, I'm coming when everybody.
No, you
Well, I
guys
can't be
you
there.
definitely should come
For
to Baton
sure.
Rouge. And
Yes.
Louisiana is not just New Orleans. We have things to offer in Baton Rouge as well. We have, we have a good time in the city. And yeah, so football season is our specialty. So anytime during football season, you guys feel inclined to come to the city, I will be sure to show you a good time.
Oh
Awesome.
yeah.
So tell us what you're doing right now. Do you have, any books, any products, any events, anything that we need to know about, where people can find you, all that information, all that
So
kind of
yeah,
stuff?
so all of my social media is my name. Is at Tramelle Howard, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of the things. Recently was a part of the book called the HBC Experience Southern University Edition. So you can find that book on Amazon. I am working on. I started a brand called Stand in Equity. It's so basically it's a clothing line that kind of really talked about my experience as a board member. So I'll be relaunching that in December. So yeah, follow me on social media. Currently work as a state director at the Education Trust. So you can find us on social media at Ed Trust LA, at the Education Trust, on all of the sites. That really gives a journey into all of the work that I'm currently doing with my organization. Really love my organization. Really love the work that we do on really fighting on the behalf of Black and Brown students and students from low income backgrounds. Really looking to create a system that really says that it serves all, but specifically looking at how does it serving Black and Brown students and students from low income backgrounds. This work is not for the fret at heart, but it's necessary, it's needed, and it's work that I love.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. We
Absolutely.
definitely gonna have to link up, and you'll be receiving some correspondence from myself, Dr. Hobson. If not tonight, then definitely within the next 24 hours or so. Because when we see people that are really in alignment with the mission that we're on, sees the necessity for the work that we're doing, and when you right in the middle of both of us, I mean, it just makes it that much easier to like we got to figure something out to be able to impact that next generation together.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's just too much alignment not to. So
Yeah.
definitely look out for some email. It'll come from our company email. We are HSBA. So
Yep.
probably if it jump goes into your junk, we'll definitely we'll reach out to you, let you know, hey, we shot over an email. Be sure you check it out. But we
Awesome.
really just want to make sure that we can stay in touch and whatever type of collaborations that we can do moving forward, because there's power in numbers.
Yep.
We definitely want to be able to make that happen.
Absolutely.
If you could, I mean, you left us with a lot, right? You gave us a lot. We full, but some of us can always take an extra little. So if you could leave us with that one thing, if that one person was listening and they're in that space of, I'm good at this, but I need to do that. I want to do this, but I want to do that. I mean, what's on your heart right now, that you feel is like, I must say this before we get off this show. What is that thing?
Yeah, I think the one thing that's on my heart, I think it's in a world that we're all going through our different things. So I recently, not a couple of, but last week, I buried my best friend of 18 years. She was killed tragically in a car accident, and I think that one of the things that we don't do a good job of as a society is understanding the concept of time. And so we always feel like we have more time. Like the last conversation I had with her the Friday before she was killed in a car accident, I just never in a million years thought that was my last conversation. So the time is now. The time is right now. And you are enough to do whatever you want to do in this moment. So appreciate time, appreciate the things that you have, appreciate the skills that you have, and realize and know that you are enough to do anything that you want to put your mind to. You may have to do it alone. You may not have anyone else to do it with you, but you follow your heart, you follow your mind, and the money will come.
Point blank. Period.
Look,
Drop the mic. Enough said.
well, I just want to let you know that we truly appreciate you, not what you do, but just you. And it's because of you and your obedience and your continuing love and passion and dedication. Um, is because we're all able to have hope and see ourselves following our dreams and our passion. And so I just want to thank you for, number one, accepting the invite, and we want to thank you for just coming on and being true to who you are, because what you shared with us today, looking at that picture that we got, you don't say that story. It says
Yeah,
something else. But
yeah.
so I just truly, we just truly appreciate you being you, because you're doing you very well. And from a sister to a brother, we love you. We need more of you, and just continue and doing what you're doing, because we we trying to take this thing to the top. We trying
Yes.
to raise. What do you say? Rise together. And so
Right.
we truly appreciate what you're doing. So thank you for that.
Guys, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. As I stated earlier, if there's any way that I can continue to collaborate, continue to help you guys rise to the top together, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Phone call, text message away. So yeah, it's been great. I really enjoyed this, and we're an hour and 15 minutes in, and it doesn't even feel like it.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, and we will make sure we continue that. We're family. We
Yes.
will be connecting very, very, very soon, and so we're going to go ahead and put you in the backstage quickly while we close out, and then we'll just close out with you. So thank
Okay,
you
perfect.
again.
Thank you.
So we're going to keep it short, but absolutely amazing. I mean, this is why we have the Black Podcast, because people need to hear more stories. You would have never thought, oh, he's in education. He chooses to be in education. He chooses to make the money that he made when he was first starting. He could have been a lawyer. He could have been a whole lot of other things. He said he'd been valuing education since he was 2 years old. So he had options, but the fact that his passion and his purpose in life was attached to helping young men or women that look like him come through this system that we call education. He loved education, and he's one of the few that can make it through education, but there's a whole lot of kids that can't do the things that they can do, or that he can do, or they can do it but they don't know that they can. And so to have someone who's in this leadership position make these changes and this impact, and be very real and true when they get to the up there to the table, because you can go to the table, you can talk a whole lot of smack, but when you get to the table, if you change what you're saying because you want to make sure you don't hurt no feelings. So to have somebody at the table who's saying, I don't care about your feelings, I don't care if you agree with what I'm saying, this is right and this is wrong. We need more people like that. So thank you, thank you, thank you to Mr. Howard for just continuing to be that voice and that person at that table.
That's it. And the world can say what they want about us here in the South, but we know the greatness that we have. But the world will only know when we collectively come together, and like we're that force that they can't ignore anymore. So we're going to be doing that for sure, at least the beginning steps of that, reaching out to Mr. Howard. And we hope that you all who are tuning in continue to tune in. And, those of you who know you have value to add, like, don't hesitate to reach out. You can go to our website at any time, fill out the form, inquire on, okay, how can I help? What is it I can do to help you guys reach more schools, help you guys, I don't know, connect with the right individuals to reach more kids? Go check out our website. We are hsba.com. And drop a few words. I know Dr. Hobson, she didn't get that doctorate, go through all those years and go through all the education that she's doing. How they say it, I didn't come this far just to come this far. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much more work that needs to be done. We're gonna do it, but we can do it a whole lot quicker whenever more people come to the table, and we can make that table bigger, fit more people, and eventually help change more lives. So off that note, guys, we are out of here. Next week, same place, same time ish. You'll be receiving an email for all of you who are subscribed to our mailing list. You'll be receiving our mail out here within the next couple of days. Off that note, much love. Y'all stay well. Stay cool. I know down here in the South, stay cool.
Houston is
And
hot as hell. I'm
we'll see
sweating right now.
we'll see you guys on the flip side.